sports card fans. Welcome back to another episode of Two Guys, One Hobby. How you doing, Don?
Doing well, John. How was your
Good
Christmas?
Christmas?
We did have a good Christmas.
Yep. We had a whirlwind weekend. We had stuff Christmas Eve, then Christmas Day, and then it was just a lot of stuff going on, but good time with family.
We normally go to my in-laws on Christmas Eve, and my mother-in-law got COVID. So I thought we were going New Year's Day, and my wife just informed me we're going over there Saturday at noon, which is when Penn State plays in the bowl game.
Oh, God, yes.
I was like, are you kidding me? So I'm going to try to tape it and not see the score. And
well, I'll make sure to text, not to text you with how they're doing. Of course, my son.
Are you serious?
My son being in the blue band, he's I think he's leaving tomorrow or maybe it was tonight to head down to Atlanta. So that'll be fun. Hopefully they'll at least show a half a second or so of the blue band on TV. So yeah, crossing my fingers that Penn State wins. So anyway, of course, we have a guest here. Looking forward to bringing him on here, and sort of an intro to what we're going to be talking about, at least mainly. We've talked to all our guests so far, Don. They have a different way of collecting, their personal preference, what they're interested in. You have, we just had Rick, Rocket Rick, and he collects complete sets. We have some team collectors, player collectors.
Brandon,
new registry
sets, right?
Yeah, so many different ways. And I thought about this guest here because it will talk about another aspect that all of us as collectors, I think, have to decide upon. And maybe over time, over the years, someone may switch philosophies, but it's the old thing about quality versus quantity in your collection. Do you want to go after as many cards as possible, which is sort of where I sort of lean? Or do you want to have a smaller collection focused on maybe higher end cards or higher grade cards, and maybe only buy a few cards a year based, depending on your budget? Right. And so our guest today, Vince, NYYanksFan7, watching his channel, he has an amazing collection. Hopefully he'll show some of those cards off. He is more, in my view, more of the quality. His just has an amazing collection, but he doesn't have thousands and thousands of cards. Now he may have, and maybe just not show them. We'll talk about that. But let's bring Vince on, NYYanksFan7. Vince, welcome to the show.
Hey fellas, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So for those who do not know Vince or his channel, you've been around you're one of the longtime YouTube channels. I think aren't you a new YouTube Sports Card Hall of Fame inductee for 23?
That happened a couple of years ago.
Oh, maybe 22. Okay. But I knew you made it, and maybe just talk about your collection, your channel you've been on for a long time. There's some old videos on his channel. I'll put a link to Vince's channel in the description of this video, by the way. You did Friday Vintage, something like that, I think they're called.
Still do for Friday Night Vintage on occasion. It's hard to do that on a regular basis, but I do it when I feel like I could justify doing it.
Yeah.
I have something to show, basically.
Sure. So, Vince, for those who are not familiar with your channel, maybe you can give a little bit of background on your collecting history, what you collect, and then we can maybe get into this topic of quality versus quantity.
Yeah. I was listening to you off stage. I never really had a plan when it came to collecting until maybe now, and we'll talk about that, right? I started here on YouTube in 2008 when it was like the Wild West. And I had a different channel name at the time. It was Darth Fungus. And there's really no rhyme or reason. It was at the time I was like, all right, YouTube, let me come up with some ridiculous name just to do it. And, and we never really took it seriously back then. And it was a very, very small pocket of card collectors. And I ran with that from 2008 to I think 2013 when I made it to NYYanksFan7 channel. And so total of 15 years. And honestly, I would say over the years, I've had somewhat of a ADHD approach to collecting. Meaning sometimes I'm focused in this little vein or something specific, and then I want to do this now. Oh, I'm going to go back to this. Oh, and I'm going to try this over here. And I also historically have collected a lot of stuff, different stuff. So primarily the sports cards has been my main thing. But there's a time when I was buying video games, collecting those sealed games, comic books, and I still do, just not nearly as much as I used to. And now that I'm getting older, I'm trying to kind of, whittle down, how much stuff I'm actually, bringing in. And I think I mentioned this I was on with somebody, Adam, that I want to kind of reduce mass a little bit, and then I went into, maybe I want to sell some of these cards I don't really care about someday, some way, somehow. And I toyed with the idea of, Joe and I, Silver Jacket Value, let's get a table at a show sometime, maybe, and he actually wants to do it in 3 months. I'm not ready to do it yet. Honestly, my plan with my collection, and as far as number of slabs go, I might have like 600 or 700. I'm going to give it some time to see if my son gets into this sort of thing, and just dump everything on him if he wants it. Keep the good stuff to myself, obviously, but I've got a lot of slabs that, any aspiring new collector might want to have.
Right.
If he doesn't have any interest or show any interest in this hobby, then I will start to, thin it down a little bit some way, somehow, either through various sales channels, eBay, or a show will be nice. But my focus, I've really never had a focus. I mean, I know you've seen the vintage, I've done the modern, and then I've done multi-sport. But as I guess my collecting focus is maturing a little bit as I am. I mean, I'm 50 now, Don. So I'm old.
I think you're the youngest though of the three.
I was going to say I hit that number 6 years ago, man.
I'm 51, almost 52. Don has a few extra years on us too. So yeah.
But I am starting to be a little more particular, a little more specific. But so I really can't say, how do I collect? How have I been collecting? It's been all over the place. And now today I'll look back and I'll say, geez, man, I wish I didn't do that, or I wish I had done this. And I think we all have done that. Yeah. But I think one of the things now is, I say it over again, is reducing mass. I stopped buying comic books off the rack every month, 5 or 6. And I think I told Adam that, I went to my comic book store guy and I said, look, I'm done for now. I mean, I literally have, 200 or so comic books that I haven't read. And I'm probably not going to get to them at this point with the 5 and the 3-year-old and the sports and the things really. So I just had to draw the line, just, bag and board, box them up, and someday whatever, But the cards are something that probably will never go away. I'm still buying. And, as you alluded to, I'm a little bit more focused. You had mentioned Joe's video. Silver Jacket, and he hit our goals align, a lot of them align from how we want to move forward, and then also some of the cards maybe we're targeting for next year. But I don't have an answer. I don't really have a way. How do I collect? I don't have a good answer. I just kind of was like buying. I'll buy this, and let me do this, and let me do that, and I jump around.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, because I've seen, again, in watching your videos, you're not just collect baseball cards. You dabble in all the different sports, and again, you have some modern cards as well. So you're maybe not focused in that area, but I do see the particular card when you decide to pick up a card, whether it's a modern or vintage, basketball, football, baseball. You tend, relative to the card, and maybe you can, if you have some to show off, we talk about maybe some of the older cards, maybe pre-war or things like that, just because of the expense of some of those cards. You have gotten lower grade copies. They still look great because you still, I think we share a thing in terms of eye appeal. I think both of us are, regardless of the number grade, whatever card we pick up has to look good to us. Whether it's a 33 Gaudi that you have in a 1 or a 2 or something like that, for that grade, it's really nice looking copy. Some of your other cards I saw some of your Nolan Ryan cards that are 7s, 8s, 8.5s. the centering and corners, I mean, they look spectacular.
So what you're saying is like you wouldn't like this card? And a crease, got my initial on the back from when I was a kid, twice even.
Well, depending on the card,
Right.
I may actually go for something like that, right?
No, I hear you, man.
So,
But beyond just looking for cards with nice eye appeal, obviously I can find a card and let's say it's a card from the 50s or 60s. I can find a card that to me has decent eye appeal, but maybe a 4. You've chosen, and then maybe it's just a case of different budgets. We won't get, I won't get personal into budgets. All of us have different means available to us to put into our hobby. But you tend to, at least for most of the cards that I've seen, like I said, there may be some exceptions, go for that higher condition, that higher grade copy of that card. Is there a particular reason for that? Are you looking for value? Is it just a preference that you want a card not only well centered but sharp corners as well, and that's really important to you? So what's the sort of philosophy there in choosing the cards once you decide, hey, I want to go after this particular card? What are your criteria and what you look for?
So it depends on what era the card is from, right? So if you're looking at like the 1970s, I'll probably be looking for something that I want to be somewhat of a pack fresh appearance to it. And that typically puts you around the 8th grade, right? So when I was collecting 70s cards, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, my target grade was an 8. In a few cases, I went with 7.5. So I thought that was the best for me for that particular decade, the best combination of value and certainly eye appeal. Centering is very important. So when you start going back in time, then I'm a little more forgiving and less concerned about the numerical grade. And that's where the eye appeal starts to overlap and start going, passing that as far as what I'm looking for. Because some of the cards I target, certainly in the higher grades, are just, I don't have the wherewithal to come anywhere near, I can't get a PSA, 8 Ruth, So
right.
I think a lot of us are in like the, authentic to 1, maybe 2, pool, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, for example, while we're talking, I got a couple here. Now, here's a card that is notoriously tough to find centered, right? Very important quality. And it's only a 1.5. I don't know if you can see that, but it's the Wilt Chamberlain rookie card. It's only 1.5, but the centering is about 50-50.
Yeah.
And it's very clean. There's no surface issues. This maroon area is nice and clear. There's just a crease that happens to cut across the top, which justifies the technical.
Okay.
And I bought this, 2021. So maybe the value has gone down a little bit, but I don't care. I just really am pleased with having found an example that presents like this, regardless of what that grade is up there. Mm-hmm. Nowadays you could find maybe a 3 or a 4 for the same money. But again, that centering is tough. And so I valued, again, the eye appeal over, I didn't say I needed a 6 of this or a 5 of this. Sometimes I go for those higher grades because I know it's going to be a cleaner copy. The borders, if they're white, will be brighter white and not dingy. Sometimes I don't mind softer corners, but sometimes a little bit too much, And again, it's going to depend on what era. So if we're talking pre-war, then I'm actually, there was a time when I for whatever reason, grading snob, I'll never get a PSA 1. Usually PSA 1s look like beaters.
Yeah.
Cases, right? But if you wait long enough and look hard enough, you could find really nice PSA 1s out there. And so I relaxed my standards to include the 1, especially when going for these older cards. And then maybe within the last year, saying who cares about the qualifier? And it's going to depend on the qualifier, right? I don't particularly care for miscut or OC, but the MK, the mark, depending on what the mark is, possibly a print defect, those I can live with, I guess if you're buying to flip, maybe you're trying to avoid this, but if you're buying to collect, start to appreciate some of these other things. And we'll talk about, I could show some other cards here that kind of reflect that ideology, but
yeah, I couldn't figure out why that was a 1.5. I couldn't see the crease until you said it. But the thing is presented really well.
It is there. And so just because it has a crease, in the absence of a crease, that's probably maybe a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But that crease is an automatic. It's not going to get higher than a 1.5. Fine. And it made it much more, I guess, economical to purchase too, right? Because at the time 4s and 5s were 5,000-6,000, whatever they were, But that's one example. And on the same subject, here's another one that I really am pleased. This is a 4. It's only a 4. It's my Jim Brown rookie. And this also is really difficult to find with nice centering and a nice surface.
Oh, yeah.
This has both. And the reason why it has a technical grade of a 4 is because somebody kind of crimped that corner, almost like there's an indentation in the corner.
Oh, okay.
And you're not going to be able to see it here, but it's there, and hence the grade of 4. But otherwise, this looks really good. This reminds me of Ray from Philly had a 57 tops mantle one time that was a 4 that looked like it was a 9. And I think he had some sort of issue with it. Not unlike this. I don't know what it was specifically, but it looked fantastic for a 4. And so it's another example of, I'm not averse to the lower grades, and certainly for the key cards and some of the older, the bigger time vintage cards. That's my only choice, if any at all, So.
Yeah. Now, do you see, and I never got the sense from your channel in your videos that you're in it for the investment aspect, but do you go into, and maybe let's not talk about maybe some of the higher end cards or some of the older cards that, again, just because of the price, you're in that 1 to 2 grade level. Do you have any thought process of, hey, if I pick up this card in 7.5 and 8, that over time that one may hold up in terms of value than maybe a lower grade card? Does that factor into your decision or thought process at all, or not?
It does. I don't like to throw money at something and then have it be worthless after I've done it.
Yeah.
And so I try to do things where, okay, when somebody has to deal with this someday, it'll be very easy to deal with it. You know what I mean? So getting rid of a PSA 8 Ryan rookie, I mean, I don't have that, but I have a 7.5, but be a lot easier to do than getting rid of a PSA 2 Ryan, in my opinion, right? So I'm not have to worry about any of that because it's not part of my plan. But also again, the higher grades oftentimes tend to just look nicer. So I want them to look nice.
Right.
But from the invest, I don't invest. I mean, it's kind of like I'd rather put a couple grand into a card than say, and not that she does, but like my wife spending a couple grand on a purse.
Yeah.
That purse is worthless. And you're not going to say, that's going to a tag sale eventually, maybe, I don't know.
Yep.
Where this is actually probably going to hold value, at least maintain value and possibly appreciate value ahead of the inflation rate. So, when my kids are splitting everything up someday, they got a little bit of coinage to work with. I don't know.
Yeah, with the cards over the purse.
I do a lot of Mike Baseball Collector, and I do this vintage 100 index. So I'm looking at a whole bunch of historical prices and different grades and things like that. And generally speaking, the higher grade vintage over time. Now you're going to get some fluctuations. You have the COVID bubble, and then after that, and to some extent, some vintage cards are softening the prices and values of it. But I think generally speaking, long term, those higher end, higher graded vintage cards are ones that tend to at least maintain their value, increase over time. And it's only sort of like a trickle down effect. Do you get it? Do you see it with, say, mid-grade cards? So, once the higher grade copies go up and then maybe get out of the price range for some collectors, then the majority of collectors say, okay, well, I can't afford a 7 now, so let me look at a 5. And then those 5s, but they lag, and they may have more volatility, and the same with 3s, given the card. So I can see how having a a collection that is more defined, not as large, but of high grade cards in terms of I don't want to say investment. I don't like to use the word investment, but just at least maintaining value, or at least maybe growing value a little bit. Because also in those higher grades for vintage, usually the population count's a lot smaller. And so that helps, I think, keep those values up as well.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, this is me. Not so much an investment, but maybe you're not remorseful someday looking back on all that you've done and thought, oh, why did I throw all my money away at that? Well, you didn't throw your money away, because if you want your money back, you could probably just, unload them to, you could sell them.
Yeah, anyone can do that if they watch your videos where you go through the case and you're moving them all around. And I remember the first time I saw one of those, I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, that's a great card. Then you'd pull something else. I'm like, that's even better. And you just went on and on. I'm like, oh my gosh. I don't see any remorse in that case.
Well, no, there's no remorse there. There's some remorse, in the prospect game.
Right.
Which, I've occasionally gotten into, in little spurts here and there, but I think I'm done with that, where I'll go and focus on some Yankees prospects. And I'm like, okay, just to see, hey, how well did I do here? Right.
Yep.
I mean,
who's your biggest hit and who's your biggest bust?
Oh gosh. Right now, well, so it's too early to tell, but right now, Jason Dominguez, I paid top of the market for a Sapphire. It was like $700. Now I think they're $100.
Yeah,
but he hasn't played yet, really. I mean, he played a little bit. He looked really good, but so it's hard to say. I mean, will it ever attain 700? I don't know if it'll ever get back to that number again. Like, that's like the number that it's when he plays 20 years and it looks like he's a lock for the Hall of Fame. That's what that's right. So I got caught up in that a little bit. That's my biggest bust right now. As far as my biggest hit, I would say I bought a Shohei Ohtani 2018 Bowman Chrome Purple Refractor, number to 250, PSA 10, and I paid $90 for it. And then last fall, it sold for $7,500. Now it's come back down to about half of that.
Yeah.
Shohei was pretty, but that would be my biggest win. But I want an Ohtani card in my collection. Yeah. And so that's it. That's what I did. I bought that card.
Right.
I wish I had purchased, that's him batting. I wish I had purchased the one of him pitching too to kind of go with it. But that one's now, it's absurd. I wouldn't pay what that market value is today for that card. I would take whatever that money is and put it towards a vintage card. Right. Because Ohtani could blow his arm out for all we know, or who knows? He's still got 15 years left or 12 years left, whatever his deal's worth. So
yeah. Well, hey, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a general focus and then having some fun. Now for me, I don't do any prospecting or whatever. Fun is maybe occasionally opening up some packs, and okay, if I hit a card or whatever, that's great or whatever. That's my little fun, my little little side pleasure of just enjoying it, knowing that I may be spending the money and getting nothing out of it. I'm sure that with my Wade Boggs collection, we talk about not wanting to have any regrets or anything. I certainly don't regret my Wade Boggs collection, but I realize that through different things, how much I paid for some of the cards. When an autograph card of Boggs, there weren't many of, and I had a lot of them, right? Well, now they're all over the place. And so I look back at some of the, what I paid for some of those autograph cards out of a 10. I'm like, okay, there's so many out of 10 autographs now that it just has watered down the value. You can get them all day on eBay. So I'm sure if I look back and add up all the money I spent on my Boggs collection versus what I may be able to sell for it now, most likely I would not get my money back. But I've had so much joy beyond that I don't mind. But for my vintage, while I sort of occasionally look in to see what a card's value is. I'm not too much concerned because, hey, I own the card now. Whether it's how much I paid for it, it's what it's worth now or less or more, it doesn't factor into my joy of the card because I love the card. But I think I would have a little bit more regret on the vintage side if I spend all that money on vintage and we're go to sell it, or when my son gets it, when he would go to sell it, and it'd be worth a lot less. Now, I don't think that's the case with vintage though. So I'm okay there, but my other Boggs collection, that's a different story. That's more a labor of love and just enjoyment and not about the value at all.
Like 1,000 1984 Topps cards, or however 5,000 or however many you have.
Yeah. Although I did get some pretty good deals in some of those lots. But yeah, if I were to just dump 1,000 1984 Topps Boggs cards on eBay, probably not get my full money back.
Right.
You might have a condition, son.
What's that?
You might have a condition, son.
Yeah. Yes. I go to weekly meetings. So
Vince, the story, you said how old you are, so you obviously didn't see Mickey Mantle play, and I think you're either from New York or New Jersey. I know you're from that area somewhere.
Upper state New York is where I'm grew up. I live in Metro New York now.
Okay, gotcha. So what's the love affair or the fandom with Mantle?
So that's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a Yankees fan, and I just 15 years ago, 16, I decided I wanted to collect Mickey Mantle. That was the vintage guy, the baseball card world, Mickey Mantle, the 52 Topps Mantle and its iconic status. I decided I wanted to put together a run of his career to the best of my ability. And originally, my plans were, I had a plan back then for this. In the 60s, my target grade was PSA 7. And then as far back as I can go with that, once I got into the 50s, and then just diminishing as I got closer to the 51, 52 Topps. Didn't quite work out the way I had planned. I got a couple of 6.5s in the 60s era. And then as I got into the 50s, they became 6s and 5. Yeah. So there was a point where, I do have the run now. The 52 Topps that I acquired 4.5 years ago. I actually thought I would never get that card. I had bought a 83 Topps reprint because it was his first ever reprint card, authorized reprint from Topps. Yeah. Came in a box set. I think it was to celebrate the 30th anniversary of that set. And I bought that PSA 8 thinking, well, I guess this will be it for that. I had the 51 Bowman that I bought that outright when those were it's all relative, but when they were definitely less than they are now. But then I was lucky enough to get the 52 Topps Mantle. And it's not attractive card. It's miscut. I showed this. It's right here. It's for someone that really focuses on centering. This is anything but.
52s though are so hard though. There's most of them are miscut. It's really hard to find a well-centered 52. Yeah. And let alone in the Mantle, and when you do, you're going to pay for it. But that
comes back to what you said. Your pickiness or your concerns go down depending on what card it is. Maybe you wouldn't have been able to get that card if it was centered or better. Who knows? I don't know your situation, but there's not a cheap version of that card.
Yeah,
I recognize that, Don. That it was either that or never.
Right.
So I had to throw all my standards out the window, whatever those were, when it came to collecting, and just be happy I can get a copy. I'm just grateful that although it's an MC, there's still border showing. So I'll take comfort in that. But it's one of those cards where it's like, if I didn't get that then, I wouldn't own it today.
Did you pick that up at a show, or did you get
no.
If you bought it, or was it online? Or
it was it was a Sunday morning, and I just had to be. I've always checking for Mantle cards back then, and Baseball Card Exchange had just posted an eBay auction for the card, and I emailed him right away saying, "All right, what's your?" I think through the Baseball Card Exchange website, I emailed him, to avoid the eBay police.
Yeah.
So you got this on eBay. What are you looking for? He's like, well, he said, it was $10,000 on eBay. He says, I want 9,000 cash or 9,250 on the credit card. And I didn't want to mess around because it was just listed. And I said, okay, I'll give you the credit card. I thought that, when you're spending $10,000, $250 is really just a few more nickels and dimes in the big picture. And if I was able to secure the card, I would have killed myself if somehow somebody swooped in and hit the buy it now.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So that's how that came about. And I remember I was chasing the UPS driver when I was scheduled to be delivered because I was following on the way in, and I live on a little private road, and it was in the wintertime, February, and the UPS driver, he's coming, and then I got the update, oh, he can't deliver. Like, what the hell's going on? Anyway, there's some ice at the start of our private road where he didn't want to drive up, whatever. So I had to call, and I tracked this guy. He's here. No, he's here. I was going house to house where this UPS. I said, oh no, now he's going on this road. No, here. So I finally found. I said, hey, you got my package. I need this thing, And so I signed for it at somebody else's house, and somewhere 2 miles away.
Story.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that one.
That was an important card.
I'd say so.
But that was a timing. A lot of things came into play where I was able to financially take care of that. That and if I didn't do it then, I wouldn't own the card today.
Yeah,
I wouldn't own the card today. No question. They're 20, 30,000. No, I'm just
right.
No, not going to happen.
Well, since we've been talking about Mickey Mantle, I do have a couple trivia questions. We'll do one now and then maybe one right before we wrap up. So Vince, we're going to test your Mickey Mantle knowledge. When I looked up these trivia questions, I got both of them wrong. So Dawn, we'll see how you do. But here's the first one. What forced Mickey Mantle onto the disabled list and out of the 1961 home run record chase? Now, this is a multiple choice, so maybe I'll make it a little bit easier. 1, he contracted acute food poisoning by eating a bad dinner during a road trip to Boston. That's one potential choice. A torn ligament caused by an awkward slide into third base. A hip abscess caused by a bad reaction to a shot. Or a broken arm caused by crashing into the outfield walls. So what placed Mantle on the disabled list in 61 that took him out of the home run race? Was it acute food poisoning, torn ligament, a hip abscess, or a broken arm?
Hip.
I agree.
Hip?
Yes.
Yep, the hip abscess. Mickey had a long history of injuries and ailments, perhaps none more notorious than the hip abscess he suffered in the final week of 1961 as a bad reaction to a cure-all shot administered to help cure a viral infection he was suffering from. The abscess sidelined him for the final week of the 61 season and paved the way for Roger Maris to hit his historic 61 home runs.
I think the viral infection and acute food poisoning is code for going out with Billy Martin and Whitey Ford.
Well, yeah.
I'm not buying the food poisoning and the cure-all.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't realize. I know Mantle had suffered from various injuries. I thought one time it was his knee or ankle and things like that, but I didn't. I didn't know about the hip abscess.
So I wouldn't have known the answer if it wasn't multiple choice.
Okay.
So
no, I wouldn't have either.
Yeah. Well, so Vince, one of the things I think that I sometimes don't put into perspective, think about when I see people showing off their collections, is the length of time that they've been collecting. So how long have you been collecting, especially vintage cards?
Well, I really started collecting in '85. I started opening packs, chasing Dwight Gooden rookie cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say I did that until, that was started early pre-junk wax, approaching junk wax era, right? 87, 88, And I want to say I stopped around 1990. Okay, so it's been about 5 or 6 years there where I was actually heavily into cars. Me and my friends, we would trade cars, this, that, and the other. And then I got back into it, I want to say in the late 90s, maybe around the time of the home run chase, and picking up SCD, Sports Collectors Digest.
Yep.
Back when it was still maybe relevant. And seeing all these cards for sale that said PSA this, PSA that. I mean, what the hell is PSA 7? What is this? What does this mean? And that's where I kind of got my first taste of it. I remember when PSA first started, was it 89, 90? I remember thinking, what the hell? This is ridiculous. Who's going to send their cards and they get graded? You know? And then several years later, I saw all throughout the ads, cards for sale. And people don't realize, I know cards, maybe some don't realize, maybe the newbies don't realize that, we had this big run up in prices a couple times in the last 10 years. We had 2016 and then also 2020, 21.
Yep.
But there was a time when, and it's in the late 90s, when PSA 10s and 9s and 8s were very, very expensive. For example, I remember the Ken Griffey Jr. 89 Upper Deck Star Rookie, and a 10 was like over $3,000, and like, what is it, to 1999, somewhere around, it wasn't cheap. I mean, I paid $72 for a PSA 9 86 Fleer Bonds rookie. Those are like $5 cards, but that was, in fact, you probably get a 10. I don't know what, actually, no, 10s are a little more than that now, but even 9s were expensive relative, in today's, adjusted for inflation, I should say. Yeah. And so I kind of got back into it, say the latter 90s and then early 2000s, not full on, but here and there, a little bit. And it was probably in early, maybe 2000. Oh geez, maybe 2004, I really started picking back up again. And as far as vintage cards were concerned, I didn't really have really focus on vintage until I decided to start building the mantle run. I had some vintage cards in my collection. I inherited some from my uncle, like some 1960 Topps cards, but not much. And at the time, I don't know if you considered 70s cards vintage. I mean, like a Brett rookie or something, maybe that's vintage, but it wasn't until the mid 2000s where I again started the mantle run. And then I bought a 33 Gaudi Ruth and Gehrig near back to back in maybe 2007 or 8 or something like that. I don't know. And that's from then on, I started, and I started looking at T206 and other types of vintage cards. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of my collecting, I guess, nickel overview of my collecting history. I think a lot of us on here started around the same time in the mid 80s, opening wax packs.
Yeah, because where I was going, and thanks for like the background of your collecting. Like you said, I think there's some similarities, but everyone has just a slightly different story on how they get in and maybe in and out and then back in. Is that when, and I'm saying this for the audience who is watching, whenever you look at someone's collection and they show off, in the case of Vince, okay, it may be some higher grade, higher end, maybe some rarer cards. For others, some of us, maybe Mike Baseball Collector or Don with your collection, the extensive collection. I'm still on the newbie side, still building mine. But take into account how long these people have been collecting, because they haven't just bought all these cards within the last 3 years and paid the current prices for them. So, you may have a card that, and then I go back to one of your Nolan Ryan cards, because I know you recently did a player showcase, a player run video not too long ago, and some really nice cards. I'm sure all of them were not bought within the last year. And some of them you may have had for 5, 6, 7, 8 years where, an 8 was a lot less than it would be today. So it's something to keep in mind. Granted, at today's values, some of these collections, yours, Vince, others out there on YouTube, look very impressive based on maybe today's values. But that's not necessarily what all these collectors paid for those cards when they did, especially if they've been collecting for a long time.
Yeah, I saw you grab some cards. I was just about to ask you to see some more cards because I know you've got a bunch of great ones.
Well, so here's Ryan. And so I don't mind sharing. So there's a 7.5.
Mhm.
I paid $1,700 for this card.
Yeah.
In 2016, 2017. I did a lot of buying from, let's say, 2010 to 2020. And this was, this was one of them, one of many. And after the Mantle run, I don't know if I had finished it yet. I think I must have finished it yet. When I overlapped, I started the Ryan run. And so I did his run as well. But the last Ryan card I got was a SGC 9594 Tops gold, just because I couldn't find a PSA graded copy and I wanted to be done with it.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying? I said, all right, the hell with it. Give me the SGC and maybe I'll crack it out, and satisfy my OCD and submit it to PSA someday, right? But at least I get the card. Yeah. But a lot of these things you see, I mean, like my Ruth, I have a 33 Gaudy Ruth. Now where is it here somewhere? This one, I paid $1,500 for this card.
Jeez.
It's a 2.
Yeah. And that's what is it, a 2?
2, yeah. Just a 2.
Looks great. Just
it has nice centering. It's my favorite Ruth card. It's just the one I chose. And I also have the Garrick. But yeah, John, people look at this stuff and it's like, even some of these guys with these bigger vintage cards. I mean, you look at VCP, right? And if you go back and look at all right, here's a recent pickup. Here's another card. I don't know, maybe you saw this one. This is brand new.
Oh, the greenback, yes. Yeah.
This card, I don't know what, 5, 6, 7 years ago, is maybe a third of what this is now.
Yeah.
Just is what it is. I think people are realizing. Honestly, I'm turned off. The modern stuff. I think the pomp and circumstance of a 1-of-1 has been diminished dramatically with the fact that there's just so many 1-of-1s, and who gives a shit?
I know.
Maybe you want to edit that out, but
I personally can attest to that. When the first 1-of-1 Boggs cards came out, I was all over them, and I didn't get all of them, but I have a good number of those early 1-of-1s, and I, relatively speaking, I paid up for that.
Yeah. And
now I have a master checklist of Boggs cards just to see all that's out there and to keep track of my collection and stuff. I think the checklist now is over 11,000 cards. I think he has close to 2,000 1-of-1s. It's like, really? Like, oh yeah. Well, products, Leaf, for the last 2 or 3 years now, the entire checklist of Boggs are all 1-of-1s in just different fancy parallel patterns with an autograph, and they're all 1-of-1. They're like 20 or 25. They're all 1-of-1s. Like you're spot on, Vince. I mean, I bought, I think it was Boggs's first bat knob card. I want to say it was 2015, I think, Topps Tier 1. Now, Topps had been making bat knob cards a couple years prior too, but Boggs wasn't included. I think that was the first one. And I bought that. I think that was the most I ever spent on a Boggs card. I bet you there's now 50 bat knob cards of Boggs. Some of them have autographs. Some are in booklets. Mine's just a single card. So it's like, okay, hey, I have a bat knob card, and everyone else go, oh, I got one, I got 3. I got it just over time it diminishes, which again, I'm never going to stop collecting Boggs. He's my guy. I'm going to keep collecting, but I've switched my focus more to vintage because I just don't have to deal with all these parallels. If I want 59 Topps Frank Robinson, there's a 159 Topps Frank Robinson. There's not a foil version. There's not a refractor version. There's not an autograph version. It's the 59 Topps Frank Robinson. Now I can dicker on grade, condition, eye appeal, but once I have that card, that's it. I'm done. There's no others and so that has an appeal to me.
The only one of one, I mean, this is my opinion on modern, that I think matters is the superfractor one of one.
Yeah.
That's a good one of one to have. That's a popular line, right? But I feel like some companies just print, oh, one of one purple, one of one red, one of one, and it's the same image, it's the same card, it's the same, just different color border, and I don't know, it just doesn't appeal to me. I think a lot of us older collectors are old, are get off my lawn type collectors. You start to appreciate some of these cards they don't make anymore, and there's only one of them, as you said. In a lot of cases, these guys, their values aren't going to go down because something they did, right? Because they're probably dead.
Yeah.
All right. So, like look at Wander Franco.
Oh, right? Gosh. Yeah.
He was one of the guys you were going after earlier. Jeez.
I mean, I actually, before I was still into the modern, I actually was looking at like 2021 Topps Gold Wander Francos, and they were like $1,000. And I was like, seriously, let me just kind of, and man, am I glad I dodged that bullet. So no more. You just don't know.
It's even like the modern cards of old players. Like, I like to collect Museum and Clemente, and I was for a while there picking up new stuff. And just even that, there's just so much.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need all these cards, and I don't understand modern. So like that one card you said, one of one is worth getting. I have no idea what you're talking about, but but I'll have to go look it up later. But it just got to the point I was like, or like they were just weird, or they keep regurgitating the same photo over and over. I'm like, there's got to be other photos of him.
Yeah,
I would have seen the same picture pose.
Boggs has like 5 or 6 photos, images, especially that Topps use. That's it. I can guarantee the next year's Topps tribute or triple threads or whatever. Oh, yep, that image was used the last 10. Like it's
right.
Well, they don't want to pay. They have the rights for that image. They don't want to go out and spend more money to pay for the rights of another image. So they
Topps didn't do that in the 50s. If you look at their 55s and 56s, but back then it's much easier now.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite sets along talk about different images. I always love those. I think 01 to 03 Topps all-time fan favorites, where it was basically that particular year and a photo from that year, in most cases, of that player, but different from what was on the regular card that we all are familiar with. I think in later years, they kind of roll that into like the modern stuff, and there's like modern and, legend players now mixed in on the fan favorites line. But 2001, 02, and 03 fan favorites were 150 card sets, and I thought those were great. I have them in binders. I showed them, I think I went through them on my other channel years ago. Maybe I'll do it again. But those are, it's the familiar image of the year of the card, but a different player image. The only thing that comes to mind is they say it's the same year that the photo was taken. But in the case of, I think, the 58 Yogi Berra, that picture that they used looked like it was taken like 1982. Like, if you look it up, he looks like he's like the manager, when he managed the Yankees. Yeah, like dark shades on, his wrinkle, his gray hair. That's not a 1958 photograph they used for this 58 Berra card, but whatever. I'll let that slide. But you're right, Don. It's somewhat annoying. It's annoying, and it's like, who needs it, right? The modern stuff, and plus with boxes and packs costing what they are, what they.
Oh gosh.
It's throwing your money. Yeah. Look at Joe Silver Jackify. He proves it time and time again with his hobby box breaks.
Yeah. Well, he said he's going to cut back on opening wax in 2024. We'll see if he's able to hold off. But Vince, you start off by saying that your initial sort of player run, you wanted to do a Mickey Mantle player run, and you've been able to do that. And then as you were finishing that up, you sort of crossed over and added Nolan Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know there's, and again, I haven't maybe seen every one of your videos, especially maybe some of the older ones. Do you have any other player runs, or who do you, when you think about another card? Because I think you had talked about Rose that you had maybe not complete. You were talking about, I think, either wanting to complete it or maybe I'm not sure. Are there any other players that you would like to do a player run, or is it just down to a particular card that just you have interest in and you want to go after that. And once you get that, you're going to have another card that you just have interest in.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think, one time I toyed with the idea of going with Rose because I have his rookie. I have some of the hard ones out of the way. I said, well, he's got a lot of cards like Ryan, through the 80s and I think through 89, 90. I forget now.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. At least 89. Yeah.
And so my strategy, like I start with a certain grade. Let's say with Ryan, I start with 7.5, 7.5, and then when 1970, I went 8s. And then I got to 79, I went 9s. And then I got to 83, I went 10s. And they're on 10s, or 9 in the Tiffany or whatever. And I thought, do I want to really spend the money on those Rose cards in the later years in a 10? And it kind of goes back to not wanting to have so much bulk,
Right.
So there's that. And I also considered Reggie Jackson.
Okay.
But that 71 Topps, what I don't own, is in the way. And that's a difficult card to get.
Especially in high, yeah.
Like in the kind of grade I'd want. And so, and then also he's got a lot of cards in the 80s I don't particularly care for. I did a little Yankees run of Reggie.
Okay.
And Yankees uniform from 77 to 82. But as far as complete player runs, it's Mickey Mantle, and then it's Nolan Ryan, and that's going to be that.
You're not currently doing a run of anyone or looking for?
No.
Yeah, I don't think you would go with my grade. I didn't even know what I had, but for me, that's okay.
Well, you know what? A 71 and a 5 is like a 1980 and a 9.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot better, and it's, you can obviously see.
I mean, those are the hardest cards to get. I said I targeted PSA 8s, in the 70s. But when I got my 71, what was it, Blyleven rookie? That was a 7.5. My Pete Rose, which I got this year, is a 7.5. So there's good value to be had in those half grades. It's when you want something that looks like an 8, but don't want to pay the price of it.
Right.
Yeah. When I first started collecting, I'm like, oh, I don't want a half grade, and now I'm like, half grade, like you said,
I love them.
You can maybe get a bargain. Maybe a lot of people are looking for those half grades, so you search for the 4.5 as opposed to a 4.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how the listing is, you may be able to get a pretty good bargain and a really nice looking card. I did luck out. I didn't bring it out here, but I splurged at one of the nationals when I was starting my Kari Yastrzemski run. The dealer had a PSA 7, which is what I was sort of budget wise looking at. He also had an 8, and the 7 wasn't. It was centered okay. I probably would have been happy with it, but when I saw that 8,
was it his rookie you're talking about?
No, it's the 71 Topps.
Oh, the 71. Okay.
Yeah. When I saw that 8, I was like, there's just in the bottom right-hand corner, you can just see a little bit of white, just a hint, or else it may have been a 9. And I forked over the extra money. I mean, it was less than $300 still at the time, which I thought was a good deal. But I just couldn't. And that is one of my favorite Yaz cards. I mean, it just looks so nice with that solid black border and sharp corners. And now the Yaz cards, the Yaz run, I wanted sort of like you to some extent, maybe not as high as a number, but for the 60s, I wanted 6s. I occasionally got a 7, maybe. For the 70s, I wanted 7s, 8s. So that one with my Kari Yastrzemski run, I sort of went with your type of philosophy. Now the rookie card though is in a 5, so I didn't get that one in a 6. But man, I just love that 71 Yaz.
Yeah, here's another 7.5. This is the
yeah, I still don't have that card for my collection.
So
forever.
This card in an 8, forget about it. I mean,
oh yeah.
But in a 7, I think when I bought this, 8s were $3,000, and this one I think it was around $700. I think is what I paid for this.
Wow.
Whatever year that pre-COVID.
Yeah, I can't tell. Is that a 7.5?
Yeah, 7.5. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mine's a 5, and when I think the guy had a buy it now or best offer, and I put in an offer which was fairly reasonable, and we commented back and forth just briefly. I think he maybe made a counter offer that I settled on, but he had bought it raw, and he submitted it. He was hoping to get a 7, and he was disappointed that it only came in at a 5. So he was just trying to either try to get his money back or whatever, and move on or something. And it's a nice looking 5, and it luckily fit my budget. It's still off a little bit left to right when you look at it horizontally, which is mainly where you find the off centering. But it's pretty close.
Yeah, that's off centered a little bit too. But again, you could sometimes you just can't nitpick. You can't like, oh, I'll wait for one that's better center. Well, that might not come around. And when it does, it might be so far down the road that now the market is such that you pay way more than you say. I just bought the 7, you know what I mean? So I give compromises where I feel like, I better do this because I don't know if I'll see this. Everything else about the card is great. Sharp corners, black borders, a little off center. I'll deal with that. Getting it now and being done with it. So.
All right, one more trivia question here, and then I have another sort of like one last follow-up, sort of not quite off topic, but I noticed you had mentioned something, and it made me think of a question. So, all right, Mickey Mantle hit his 500th home run in 1967. What other Hall of Famer hit his 500th home run in 1967? Was it Eddie Matthews, Duke Snider, Willie Mays, or Al Kaline? So who else hit their 500th home run in 1967 along with Mantle?
Mays.
You say Mays. Don?
Or Matthews. I'll say Mays.
My guess too. It sounds like I'm just copying Vince.
Probably Matthews, but
it was Eddie Matthews. Yep. Mickey hit his home run on May 14th, 1967, Mother's Day. Eddie Matthews followed up with his 500th on July 14th, 1967.
I didn't even think.
I thought it was. I wasn't. Matthews came first, but then I thought Mays retired at 73. He had 600. Maybe he had 500. Whatever. So when did Mays hit his 500? Do we know? We don't know.
I don't know. I could probably Google it, but I'm not sure. But the last question I had, and this is one I know I did a video on, and it sort of, again, I don't have OCD, but I have those certain types of qualities where I only collect. I have some outliers, which I'm going to be dealing with. But you primarily, I know you said that you had that one card, that one Nolan Ryan that's in a SGC, but you're primarily PSA. Is there a reason? Because I'm a PSA guy too, with all its faults and all that stuff. My collection needs to be sort of uniform. Is that your reason? Do you have other reasons why you predominantly go PSA?
So continuity, commonality, I guess, of slabs is the main reason. However, I have deviated from that over the last couple of years to get certain cards. And one thing I don't, this is silly, but like those SGC slabs are just slightly wider than the PSA ones. And I really got to jam into these cases,
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that.
Tolerances, I mean, they work, but you really got to shove it in there. But sometimes I go SGC if I bought a Jimmy Fox Diamond Stars. I thought it looked great in the SGC holder. It was a low grade 1.5 nicely. I thought it just looked great. I picked it up. The Ryan, I basically got fed up trying to find one in a PSA slab. I even bought BVG, as maybe you're aware of, but with the intent to crack out and submit the PSA.
Yeah.
And also there's value in BVG slabs too, because they tend to go for less than PSA equivalent.
As I'm well aware, when I did my year-end top 50 most valuable, it seemed either when I looked up on VCP, either there was one sale in the last year of that BVG card in that grade, or there was no sale.
Yeah.
In the year.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, anyway, I beat myself over the head for submitting them that way years ago, but I'm going to have a plan in 2024. You'll have to watch my video come the beginning of the year when I do my goals. I have a plan that I'm going to stick to, and so I'm going to correct that eventually. So
yeah, I've got an answer for you. So Babe Ruth, Willie Mays hit his 500th on September 13th, 1965.
2 years earlier.
At
Wow.
the time, he was joining Babe Ruth, Jimmy Fox, Ted Williams, and Mel Ott as members of the 500 Home Run Club.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And he finished with what, like 6 something. So he really tailed off the last several years. Then,
yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
Did Mays finish with?
Yeah, he had 6 something, right?
Like 660.
660, I think.
So
yeah. Yep. So yeah, we're right around that 1 hour mark here. Anything else, Vince, that you want to talk about in terms of just for all those who have probably the 3 that have remained watching after an hour on our videos here, that about ways to collect, your methodology, anything like that you want to impart to other collectors out there?
I would just say that there's some people that have really high grade, really nice vintage stuff, like just unobtainable for most. And if you're trying to build a vintage collection and you want to go after some of these guys, my advice is just buy the nicest centered copy in the highest grade that fits your budget, whether that be 1 or 5 or 7 or what have you. High eye appeal, vintage, regardless of grade, will always have a place, and you won't lose. Like I said, it's never a bad time to buy a Hank Aaron rookie card. Well, it might have been a bad time 2 years ago to buy a Hank Aaron rookie card, but that's generally speaking, it's not a bad time to buy a Hank Aaron rookie card, for example. And if you're going after that card, find the nicest centered copy in the highest grade that's in your budget. That's kind of like what I do myself, So with some of these vintage. And
I think that's great advice. It's stuff that I learned early on when I first started my vintage collection. I had in my mind, and again, it was a learning curve, and I was like, all right, if I'm going to buy a card from the 70s, I'm looking for a PSA 7. If it's a card from the 60s, I want it in a 6. Well, sure, I could do that for the 79s, 78s, maybe 77s. And then as I started going back, even with those 70s cards, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I can't afford that card right now. I'd have to really save up if I want that one in a 7. Well, maybe I'll look at it in a 6. I can still maybe find, and it was a slow progression. It probably took me a year to say, you know what, the number, just, it's not that. For me, I look at how much money I'm willing to pay for a particular card. I look it up in VCP and I say, my budget for this particular card is $50. All right. That means I can look at, maybe if I get a good deal on a 6, maybe it's a 5 or 4, whatever the case may be. And that's what I target because that fits my budget. Then I look for the card with the nice eye appeal. And so, I'm not shooting for the stars and say, man, I need to have this card in a particular grade, with the exception of my Corey Yastrzemski. That was just a special run because of him. Everything else is budget and eye appeal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think a lot of people subscribe to that. A lot of veteran collectors subscribe to that. It kind of goes back to that cliche term, buy the card, not the grade, which we've beaten to death 1,000 times over. But it's true. And I've been guilty of buying the grade and not the card in my collecting history. And I've admitted that in some videos, and I gave examples of here's what I did and why. And yes, I bought this grade, and look at this card. I wouldn't buy this card today looking like this, but it was a 7, so I bought it. I'm a little more particular now, for sure, and I am willing to make compromises for the right card.
Right.
Understanding that you don't see it that often. So what do you want to do? Is this it or isn't this it? And if I keep going back to a card over and over again, which has happened to me, that's the card.
Yeah.
Keep thinking about it, looking at it, thinking about it, this has to happen somehow, some way. So, but yeah, that's my collecting wisdom, but that's nothing new. I think a lot of collectors kind of think the same way. You know, the nicest copy.
Yeah, it is, because you see some of these collections here on YouTube and a lot of collections that even aren't on here, and it's just you can't. You can appreciate them, enjoy them, but you got to be realistic. You can't be jealous and go, "Oh my gosh, I can't get that card." Well, yeah, you can. You just got to take a little time and do what you said, Vince, and find the nicest grade or the nicest card in the best grade you can afford.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Well, Vince, we really appreciate you coming on, talking about your background philosophy. Again, it's a different, a slightly different way than some of our other guests that we've had on in terms of, it may not be a philosophy per se, but it's just how you've built your collection. And it's great to get different viewpoints from different collectors on how they enjoy the hobby. So again, we really appreciate it. And again, for those who have stuck around, I will have the link to Vince's channel, NYYanksFan7, in the description of this video. Definitely go check his channel out if you're not familiar with it. And with that, that's all we have for you. So we really appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you next time.